I call on the convener, Tommy.
Moderator McNeil 454. As new kids on the block, allow me to share with you the remit of the Faith Action Programme leadership team. Faith Action Programme leadership team shall lead and deliver the Faith Action Programme to enable the delivery of the Church's identified priorities. It shall implement the strategic objectives of the General Assembly and the strategic priorities of the Assembly Trustees. FAPLT shall work with the Assembly Trustees, the General Trustees, Presbyteries, and other parts of the Church with the purpose of nurturing the people of God in their worship, witness, and service. Our heart as FAPLT is to make real, visible, tangible, and living the vision of the Church of Scotland, which is, and I'm sure you could quote this back to me, to inspire the people of Scotland and beyond with the good news of Jesus Christ through enthusiastic, worshipping, witnessing, nurturing, and serving communities. We will look to do this in accordance with the 3 priorities agreed by the General Assembly that are in line with seeing the 5 marks of mission being lived out in our churches and communities. These 3 priorities being the growth and development of the Church through new presbyteries working closely with local congregations and encouraging the forming of new worshipping communities. Secondly, the work of the national on the local need with a particular emphasis on recruiting and equipping our future leaders in ministries of the Church. And thirdly, the modernisation and simplification of our governance structures. So, with what we've been tasked with, what is our response? It was the theologian Karl Barth who said, "Take your Bible in one hand and your newspaper in the other and read both. But always interpret your newspaper from what the Bible says." Allow me to make this statement a bit more relevant for us here today. Here is an old copy of the Blue Book, the last one that was printed in 2019. Not the last copy, I could sell it on eBay, but the last time we had a printed copy, which was in 2019. In that book and the online edition that you have this year, there's reports, statistics, projections, and challenges. And what the reports bring alive for us this year is the fact that whilst the Church of Scotland continues to do truly remarkable work through truly remarkable people, we find ourselves in the midst of a deeply challenging and uncertain moment. I've been on a number of councils and committees over the years, and I've always had an awareness of the sheer amount of work our central and national staff do. Now, with being convener of FAPLT, I have a front row seat, and my sense of admiration for our staff grows by the day. We as a church are served by remarkable people who face the same challenges as we ministers and other workers are facing on the ground, carrying on significant existing work, whilst having to adapt and change to take on lots of new work. More than my admiration and gratitude, they need our prayers and they need to hear and receive the well done of God. As I begin the Faith Action Programme Leadership Team report, allow me to do 2 things. First of all, appeal for grace and patience. We have 4 programme groups who undertake an amazing amount of work, and on the back of this assembly, that will move to 5 if we so decide. Time doesn't allow me to speak specifically about such work. But if you would like to know more about the work of our programme groups, please feel free to ask a question at the appropriate time. I'm simply going to be presenting an overview of our work in our first year. And then secondly, allow me to follow Karl Barth's advice and so appeal to Scripture to find the moment that we're in. I believe that we as a church are in an Isaiah 6 verse 1 moment. In the year King Uzziah died. Interesting that the moderator mentioned this as part of his wonderful communion service on Monday. We need to know how difficult and earth-shattering a moment this was for Isaiah. Uzziah was a righteous king. He may even have been a relation of Isaiah. As God's prophet, Isaiah had a listening ear and a receptive heart in Uzziah, a positive context for Isaiah to minister in. With Uzziah gone, Isaiah could no longer take his present or future for granted. He had more questions than answers. He would be well aware that many of his prophetic friends in Israel's history had a very rough ride communicating God's heart to his people. As such, Isaiah, with the death of Uzziah, would shift from being confident about his present and his future to being concerned and fearful. We as a church find ourselves in an Isaiah 6 verse 1 moment. COVID, presbytery reform and mission planning have left us hurting and struggling. And all of you in the assembly hall listening to me today can relate to this, as well as all of you online. It's been a very long time since I preached a three-point sermon, but allow me to revert to my old ways and frame my report around 3 points. The sad moment Isaiah found himself in, the suddenly encounter he had, and the surprising request he heard. As a church, we find ourselves in a sad moment. If you consider your heart right now, in the last 12 months even, more pain than peace, more questions than answers, more uncertainty than confidence. This is the world I stepped into last June when I took on the role of convener of the Faith Action Programme leadership team. I knew our church was struggling. I simply didn't know the extent. Towards the end of last year, I requested that I meet with and speak to our Faith Action staff team. I'm a pastor at heart, and I don't mind telling you that my heart was moved by what I saw and by what I heard. Our central staff facing similar challenges as us on the ground in our parishes. Less people being asked to do more work, uncertainty about the future, and having to process pain in the midst of your day-to-day work. FAPL then had a big picture vision day in January to speak and dream about the future. This was us 7 or 8 months in, and it was the first time we had a sense that we could do something like that. I want to record our thanks to the Reverend Graham Duffin, who was our excellent facilitator for this time. And as a gospel optimist, I was expectant and excited about this day. Such positive emotions were quickly tempered when it became apparent that we were not ready to dream about shaping our future. We needed to stop and give time to reflect, to lament, and to repent. These are not my words. These are the initial words that came from the people in the room, FAPL members and Faith Action Programme staff. I must admit to being surprised by this, and yet as we found ourselves in this Isaiah 6:1 moment, I knew we needed to give time and space to this so we would encounter God's grace and God's healing. This would be crucial to prepare our hearts to dream about a new future. We've taken that same concept on the road to our recent road shows. Time to lament and wait on God. Starting off, we've been to Aberdeen, the Presbytery of the North East and the Northern Isles, and then we were in Glasgow and Edinburgh 2 weeks ago. And we look forward to visiting the remaining presbyteries over the next few months. In our hurt and pain, we need to know Christ as our healer and restorer if we have any hope of having a different future. My gospel optimism made way for ecclesial realism. During the course of the first year, we then knew an additional sadness in the loss of Richard Lloyd, one of our vice conveners. We're indebted to Richard for his service and vision. He contributed so much to the first months of FAPL's life. Moderator, I'd like to draw the Commissioner's attentions to the paragraph at the end of our report, which I'm sure you've proved diligent in reading. It would be all too easy to focus on the activity and places and roles that Richard was engaged in. But for a moment, I want to reflect on the person he was. Richard's bright, colourful, and joyous personality was often reflected in the clothes he wore, especially his trousers. Richard Lloyd was a gospel enthusiast, a warm, kind, and friendly man of deep faith and love for people. On social media, he described himself as an ardent but failed imitator of Jesus. One of his few faults was that he was at times too hard on himself. His gospel enthusiasm led him to have a lively, infectious faith. A living epistle, an example of how faith in Jesus helps you grow young and stay young. Ordained as an elder in 2007, Richard served in a variety of roles and also was part of Dalgety Parish Church and latterly Dalmeny and Queensferry. And our prayers continue to be with Sue and the family and the congregation of Dalmeny and Queensferry at this time. Returning to Isaiah, what is helpful and hopeful for us to note is that this sad moment for Isaiah quickly changed as he experienced a suddenly moment. Isaiah 6:1 goes on to say, in the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne. The word suddenly is one of my favorite words in the Bible. When God comes in such suddenly moments, everything changes. What Isaiah was about to discover was that before God began to move and effect change around him, he first effected change by moving within him. I am convinced this is the need of the hour for all in our church. A fresh encounter with the living God. A fresh vision of who God is. A fresh vision of where God is. A fresh vision of his plans and purposes. Because when God enters the equation, whatever sobering statistics and census figures we may read, when God enters the equation, everything changes. We are focusing on trying to shift from the place of lament to knowing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are in a moment of crisis, but this is not a surprise to God. Isaiah wasn't out of the woods yet. His sorrow at the death of Uzziah was exacerbated by his experience of the divine making him all too aware of his own sinfulness. His response to this glory encounter was, woe is me, I am ruined, I am a man of unclean lips. His sad moment has developed into a moment of personal devastation. He in effect was saying, God, the challenges before me are bigger than I am, so I'm going to disqualify myself from speaking for you and so shaping the future. Does that sound familiar? I wonder how many of us in our church today, in this assembly hall, online, can relate to Isaiah's words. Isaiah hears the voice of God calling him afresh, recommissioning him, and he is surprised to hear that heaven is looking for some help. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? The plural indicating that this was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit working in unity as they communicated their sense of need and their desire to work in partnership to effect change. A moment ago, Isaiah was writing himself out of the story of God. Now he's been called to put his life and his voice front and center as he's encouraged to make himself fully available to God again. And he does this wholeheartedly as he replies, God, here am I. Send me. This is the heart we have in Fappert. It's what we've said as a team. And it's what we want to invite you as our church to do. To encourage you in this, to make a positive response in this challenging moment. In January, we moved from lamenting and repenting to form our vivid vision document. It's our sense as a team what God is saying to us and what he wants us to see and who he wants us to become. A vision for our church for the near future. And you'll find this on the About Us section on our website. Our world is in distress. Death and destruction, crisis, turmoil, fear and anxiety are a daily reality for many in our world, and are also many other words we are wrestling with in our church. This is particularly the case if you live in Palestine, in Gaza or the West Bank or in Israel, in Russia or the Ukraine, Daily life can be unbearable and fearful. Our international partners, our friends from around the world, who I had the honour of welcoming and introducing to our General Assembly, they could bear testimony to such pain, such fear, a daily reality for some of them. In conclusion, I believe God is calling us as his church, the Church of Scotland and the church in Scotland, to shift from struggling and living in an Isaiah 6 verse 1 moment to begin to live out an Isaiah 6 verse 8 moment. So our plea to you today, with all humility and with all sincerity, is that we respond like Isaiah did in what he said to God, and that in our hearts today, that we're going to say to the God of heaven, who's going to help us change the situation that you're in, that our response will be, here am I, send me, equip me, envision me, fill me, use me. And if we do that, we'll reveal Christ to our world, just like Isaiah did, a revelation of love, hope, and a future. God's future, not only for our church, but for our nation. Moderator, I present the report and move the deliverances.
Thank you, Convener. Is it seconded? Thank you. Now, I want to encourage debate. I want to encourage everyone who wishes to make a contribution to the debate today. We have a long list of people indicating they wish to ask questions and make comments, so much so it's off the bottom of my screen at the minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions that, before we move to receiving the report formally, questions which I'm imagining are fairly general questions. And would the speakers please give the question first, and then a very, very brief note, if they need to support their question, because we want to try and move through the business as quickly as we can. So I'm going to ask for Mary Sweetland, then Brian Kerr, and then Christine Meyer in the first instance. That just gives the folks with the technical buttons ready to move from one to the other. So Mary Sweetland.
Mary Sweetland, 159. Speaking as a member of the now defunct Net Zero Strategy Group, Section 5 of the report demonstrates the frustrations of trying to move forward a cross-cutting strategy within the church. One positive thing we achieved before action on climate change seemed to fall from the priorities of FAPILT was the Net Zero Pathway resource, which is there to support churches and presbyteries in doing their bit to care for all of God's creation. Once when I ran an eco fair at our church, someone said to me, "Oh, I didn't know the church had anything to do with climate change." Yeah. So, in the light of today's funding of £5.5 million from the Scottish Government of additional support for climate action hubs, will the convener agree to update the pathway to encourage churches to get involved, even perhaps lead community action through these hubs? And they might well be able to tap into some additional funding for their parishes. Thank you.
Convener, do you wish to respond? Okay, that's fine. Happy to have vice conveners responding. Different sections.
Mary, thank you very much indeed for the question. I think we are all deeply aware that care for creation is one of the 5 marks of mission. And as we live that out, the role of local churches engaging with climate justice and net zero activities is really critical. It has been welcomed news to hear from Ms McCallum this morning about the funding that's going to be available on local climate action hubs. and we are very committed to ensure that the net zero pathway will be kept updated with this information and other relevant materials. We really hope that these resources will be of great use to local congregations as you engage in the very important local work of tackling climate justice and helping us to move towards net zero.
Vice Convener, just hang on a wee second. Could you just say who you are, so to introduce yourself to us, and I'll maybe ask the other Vice Conveners. You might not have a number.
Apologies and thank you, Moderator. My name is Emma Jackson. I am Vice Convener of Public Life and Social Justice. This is my first time at General Assembly. I will make every mistake and do lots of poor etiquette. So please, brothers and sisters, forgive me for that. Thank you.
Vice Convener, I assure you, it's not my first time at the General Assembly. It's my first time as moderator. So like you, I might make lots of mistakes and whatever, and I've asked for forgiveness. So do not worry. I found them to be a forgiving bunch.
Phew.
Right, thank you. Brian.
Thank you, Moderator. Care 227. I read the section on new worshipping communities, 6.1, with great interest, and I also noted quite a focus on the Forge Cairn model, and that's been borne out by our presbytery being contacted to kind of buy in their services in this idea of growing new learning communities for discipling culture. I'm aware that it might not suit everyone in the church's theological perspectives or standpoint, and therefore my question is, what other providers FAPL are developing relationships with to encourage as broad a take-up as possible across the breadth of the church when considering the creation of new worshipping communities or in terms of developing discipleship, and can the convener give assurances that they will continue to work with other providers to get this breadth?
Moderator Jonathan Fleming. I'm the convener of Mission Support and Vice Convener of FAPL. Thank you for the question, Brian. As many of you will know, for many, many years, the Church of Scotland has had a very long-standing relationship with Fresh Expressions, and as such has had development worker in years gone by and continues that relationship even now. I had the pleasure of attending the Fresh Expressions Away Day for practitioners and contributors at the beginning of this year with a number of colleagues, and it was a very profitable time and a very helpful time. The assurance I can give, Brian, is that we are more than happy in the Mission Support Programme Group to liaise with as many agencies as necessary to ensure that there is a fully rounded and accessible package of material in support of new worshipping communities. And we are prepared to, as long as it's within the parameters of our budget, to be able to reach out to organisations such as CMS, the Church Mission Society, and LICC, the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity, to name but two. Thank you again for the question.
Right, thank you. I want to hear from Christine Meyer, and then E. McLean, who, if it's Jade McLean, say, well done, moderator. If it's not Jade McLean, say that Principal Clark gave me the wrong information. And then it'll be Timothy Podger thereafter. So firstly, Christine Meyer.
Thank you, Moderator. Christine Mayer, 552. I thank you for this report. I welcome the section on the planet and the net zero strategy, and I believe it is important. Convener, can you give us some examples of action being taken at the national level, the presbytery level, and the local level of people following the net zero pathway so that we can learn from their experiences and be encouraged to take action in our own spheres? I am aware that some churches, like my own, have taken some initiative to look at climate justice and sustainability within local communities. However, I feel this needs to become a priority for the wider church and give climate change the attention it needs. Thank you.
Moderator, do I need to say my name and number every time I get up to the mic to speak?
We will give you, technically yes, for the record.
Okay. McNeil 454. Thank you so much, Christine, for the question. Want to be really honest that we don't have that information to hand. But it's a pertinent question. Net zero is a priority, so we'd be very happy to engage with you and to look at how we can gather such information, and we gladly do that and then report to a subsequent General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, and am I right?
You're right. Well done, Moderator.
Thank you.
Jade McLean, number 412. My question is quite simple. It is asking you, are you sure there's going to be no need for the Assistant Minister scheme come December 2025? A scheme that appears to be extremely beneficial. And just in case there is a need, have you got a backup plan to keep this going? The reason I ask this is that I am an assistant minister in a Carrickle and Ardnamurchan, linked with our Gower, Morven and Strontian. Each of these places used to have their own minister. They don't. A lot of other churches are joining together in the same way, and therefore they're not looking for the same ministers that they used to. We have people ordained in 2022, 2023, and this group that stood up here yesterday will be in the same position looking for jobs, along with those ministers who are sadly losing their charges due to their place being linked or united with the ones next to them. In amongst all this, I think the Spirit might still be moving people to move charges. So now we have too many ministers looking for too few jobs. And sadly, I know this isn't something that I should be saying, I've applied for one 2 days after it was advertised to be told, probably don't apply because we kind of know who we're having. So this is what we're in, and this is what we're facing. So I just want to be sure that 2025, you know there will definitely be movement in the area. Thank you.
Moderator Bill Wishart, Vice Convener of FAPLT with responsibility for the People in Training Programme Group. I thank the Commissioners for the question. The short answer to all is yes, yes, yes and yes, because we are confident that things are moving. Vacancies are beginning to open, and presbytery mission plans are at the implementation stage. So we are confident that the opportunities are and will be there. And can I just say on a personal note, I'm one of the ministers whose jobs will be disappearing under the presbytery plan. So we may find ourselves sitting outside vacancy committee doors together. I do make this promise, though, that if the scheme needs to be extended for people, then we will do it. The church stood up and helped people when they needed it. We did not abandon the people that we had called and trained, and we will not do it now. So please take that assurance with you today.
Thank you. And Timothy.
Tim Podger, 340. My question to the convener is, what specific words of encouragement about the future of the church may Faith Action Programme leadership team give to all those in probation, familiarisation on assistant minister contracts, as we've just heard, looking soon to take up charges, as well as our current candidates and our youth delegates, and even all of us? I do not know how many commissioners looked at the Church of Scotland website recently, apart from moderator diligently reading all of the reports. Well, I hope you read Taking Up Ministry. This month, where Dawn, a probationer for ministry who you moderator, and we the Assembly welcomed yesterday, where Dawn speaks of her call, her passion, her enthusiasm for the people of God, working for and with the people of God. One of those calls as the convener talked about. In acknowledging what Dawn said, Sue, one of our probationers in our WhatsApp group, wrote, hopefully the commissioners will read the article before the General Assembly so they don't keep on about dismal decline and depression. I mentioned this to Sue that I might be quoting her, so thank you, Sue. Well, we must recognise the challenges, as the Assembly trustees noted. During the report of the Theological Forum, a debate was had, and during that, the church was described as in crisis. The convener just now said we are at a deeply challenging and uncertain moment. Sue was hoping for a more positive response from the Assembly. Probationers and those entering ministry need to be encouraged in their path forward. Thank you, Moderator.
Moderator McNeil 454. Thank you so much, Tim, for the provocative question. And we are in this challenging moment, but I genuinely believe, and part of my heart for the work of FAPLT is that we help our church transition from a managing decline mindset that we've had for at least the last 2 decades towards a preparing for growth mindset. I'm absolutely convinced that the promise of Jesus, which we know like himself is eternal and unchanging, he has said, I will build my church. And I'm absolutely convinced that we're in a season of transition, that we've known such pain over recent years, but that as we reach this kind of bottoming out moment, that I think we're going to see the curve turn. And I think that for candidates, for probationers, for any who are involved in any form of ministry expression, you couldn't be coming into the life of our church at a better time, because you are an absolutely integral part in shifting the focus from this managing decline mindset to preparing for growth. Because what unites us in this hall is our passion for God, our passion for his church, and our passion for his communities. And I think that our nation is going to be surprised by what God does in and through our church in the next few years.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the Assembly to receive the report at the minute, but I have one question to ask. One of the people who's indicated they wish to make a comment is Maureen Jack. Is this going to be leading to opposing receiving the report, or is it a comment thereafter? Where is she? No, that's fine. So we can, the Assembly can then move to receive the report. And online. And then I'll ask Maureen now to make her comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Maureen Jack, 288. On Saturday, we sang, "Let us build a house where prophets speak, where words are strong and true." But sadly, Moderator, when it comes to Gaza, our church's prophetic voice has often been silent. This despite the fact that we've had long and close links with partners in Gaza, and I'm just one of many who visited there on behalf of the church. Moderator, within 3 days of Hamas's shocking attack on 7th of October, the convener of the Assembly trustees and the moderator absolutely rightly made powerful statements condemning what had happened. In late November, the moderator welcomed the temporary ceasefire. But then we had 5 months without a single public statement from our national leadership until the moderator's joint statement with the Archbishop of Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. The Faith Action report quotes the chief rabbi as saying, "Those who do not condemn, condone." So, what have we not condemned? The delays and blockages of humanitarian aid. Brendan O'Hara MP visited Egypt a few months ago and saw some of the humanitarian aid to which Israel had denied entry as potentially having dual use. Wheelchairs, crutches, baby incubators. The shortage of humanitarian aid has had devastating effects. Aid like anesthesia. In January, Save the Children reported that on average 10 children a day were having one or both legs amputated, and that many of these operations were being carried out without anesthesia. In March, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child reported that 27 children in Gaza had already died of starvation or dehydration, and that many deaths had to be expected. Children starving to death. Already in January, the UN Human Rights Commission estimated that of those facing famine or severe hunger worldwide, 80% were in Gaza. And of course, we now know that starvation of civilians is one of the war crimes the chief prosecutor of the ICC alleges against Prime Minister Netanyahu. And there's the impact on Gaza's small Christian community. 17 were killed in an Israeli airstrike in October on the compound of St. Porphyrius Church, where they were taking shelter. And in December, an elderly Christian woman and her daughter were shot dead by an Israeli sniper at the Holy Family Church. Other Christians have died because their chronic illnesses could not be treated. In all, it's estimated that 30 Christians have died. 30 is 3% of Gaza's Christian community. And through all this, let's not forget our Palestinian and Israeli partners working non-violently for a just peace. Unlike the chief rabbi, I do not believe that our church's silence means that we condone what is happening in Gaza. But we should have done more. We should have said more. It's been suggested to me that our long silence was a capacity issue. But we had the capacity to make 2 statements in the immediate aftermath of 7th of October. Has our silence perhaps resulted from us being too reticent, too timid in speaking out? Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem, says in faith that he believes Christ is in the rubble of Gaza. But he cries out in pain, where is the church? We need to say to Munther and our other friends, we are here. What would you have us do? What would you have us say? And then say it loudly. Martin Luther King said once, what we shall remember is not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Moderator, let our silence end now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moderators, Alistair Cumming, 459, and Vice Convener of Resource and Presence Project Team. I thank the Commissioner very much for the comments and her question and the sentiments which are contained within that. I think it's fair to point out, however, that the moderator had signed some 20 documents and statements on behalf of the Church of Scotland, which were published with our partners on websites and were freely available. So it's not a question of the Church being silent. We have indeed, through the moderator, been signing documents, making statements, joint statements with partners. And I think that we must move forward. And I think we can probably learn from how it has been handled. But at the same time, I just want to reassure the Assembly and beyond that the Church of Scotland has not been silent.
I'm going to call on Stuart Gillen and Sabrina Stoica. Next, please, Stuart.
Thank you, Moderator Gillen, 476. I wish to thank our brothers and sisters who are sitting at that table. You've got a new name, but you're veterans and seasoned veterans at that. And we don't envy you your agenda. At the same time, we are connected in so many ways with regard to the work and the witness of the Church of Jesus Christ. Don't get to see you very often, so it's great to take the chance at least to make acquaintance. Saying that, moderator, checking messages this morning, the first one I saw was from someone named Don Binder, who's the chaplain to Archbishop Hossam Naum, who leads one of our partner churches in Israel, Palestine. The Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem covers 5 countries. Their representative, Joanne Billa, is with us, and she'll be speaking at the panel at 12:30 at St. Columba's just later on. What was the message about? Soldiers had raided the Church of the Good Shepherd in Raphidia in Nablus through the night. And immediately I saw it, and they seem to have been interested in an IT shop on the premises, but that's not how it's being felt. It's being felt as a raid on the church. And I was reminiscing because it was in that church that we signed the partnership agreement back in 2008. And Colin was then convener of the then World Mission Council, and he signed it on the Lord's table together with Bishop Suhail, and that was our formal entering into a partnership whose aims are to deepen communion, deepen our spiritual communion, and to strengthen our partnership in extending the mission of the Lord in those places. It hits home, in other words. That said, let me bring greetings from the congregations of St. Andrew's, Jerusalem, and Tiberias. We are still in existence. We are still together. It's been a rough time for it. It's a hybrid model of worship. We have people who come, and we have people who join and link live. And the congregation has been on both sides of the wall ever since the wall was built, and it's one way of naming our reality, and so saying we're holding each other together before the Lord and holding all together before the Lord at this time, it's something that has been under pressure, and we've had our moments, and yet I take great encouragement in the way that they have been able to hear each other and pray together for the same thing, for a peace that can work for all and last. Of the church more generally, we've just come through the second round of Easter greetings, the ecumenical greetings at Easter with the Orthodox churches, but everybody goes. And I want to bring 2 words from those Easter greetings. One from the Armenian Patriarchate, a father who said, "Our unity is our protection." And the fact he was speaking about protection immediately focuses the moment and tells you with what urgency these ecumenical greetings are being had this year. The other word was from Theophilus III, who is the Greek patriarch. In his response to the Easter greetings that came, he said, "The resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ never ceases. We will not despair." It sounds such an orthodox theological statement, but it hits very close to the bone at this time. It's a statement of hope, and hope itself has become one of those words that when you say it, you tend to have to say other words around it. If I could quote someone named Zogby, who's the founder of We Am, a Palestinian reconciliation organization in Bethlehem. He spoke of the hopelessness he felt, and we were shocked and amazed that he would say that. And he saw our faces and said, "I look for the hope in the hopelessness," which seemed a suitably complex statement to name his own reality and journey. He said this before the 7th of October and the war that has followed, now in its 228th day. I've been trying to find words like everybody's been trying to find words. And I hit on the word horror. When horror follows horror. And I thought, oh, good, I'll have a statement for the General Assembly. Now, what else can come? And I ended up just staring out the window, epiphany failing, still having to try to come up. So if you start the sentence, moderator, when horror follows horror, ... And where do you go? Initially, negative thoughts like no good thing can come, nor can it. But what about something brighter? What about getting on the front foot with it? When horror follows horror, we need a resolute witness to the love and justice of God in our Lord Jesus Christ that arises from a pastoral heart for all and upholds the right of all equally to live, which should never have to be said, to live and be honored. And this language of living and being honored comes from a rabbi, Rabbi Elana, from a planning meeting for a march scheduled for the 3rd of June, a march for human rights and peace. It's an interfaith march. And even among ourselves, issues of trust have arisen. Issues of the need to get off the planning agenda and just spend time with each other have arisen, Muslims, Christians, Jews, together, and very little of this is going on. There's heavy pressure on coming together, even to pray and be seen to pray together. But we are praying, and from the beginning have been praying, and refused to be told it was too soon to be praying for a ceasefire during which hostages can be released and returned to their loved ones. Prisoners being held in Israeli prisons, having committed no crime, to be released, for the free and safe flow of humanitarian aid, and many, many Scots have been contributing to this over the course of these months, and for personnel to be able to get in and out, and then, because aid won't ever end the war, praying for an end to the war, and the setting up of negotiations, people using their higher faculties to try to form a peace that will meet the needs of all, including for security, obviously. With a peace that doesn't work for all won't work for anyone. And making bold sometimes even to then pray that there be a time of freedom in which people can flourish, or know, as was said at the beginning of this assembly, know the fullness of life. If we get to the point where we're too tired or jaded to even pray for these things, lose our vision altogether, how much worse would it be? But my mind goes back to what I've heard in those ecumenical greetings. Our unity is our protection. The resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ never stops. We do not despair. Thank you.
Thank you. Sabrina. Sure.
Thank you. Sabina Stoica, number 499. Thank you, moderator, and thank you for pronouncing my name perfectly. I am from the Reformed Church in Hungary, and I would like to share some general comment on the light of the importance of international partnerships, and also remind the General Assembly of what it means to us in Hungary. The Hungarian Reformed Church is very grateful for the long-standing relationship that meant and means a lot to us, even today, during different political climates. As I'm serving as the Associate Minister at St. Columba's Church of Scotland in Budapest, and as I'm the leader of the National Roma Ministry, Ministry for Roma or Gypsy people, as the first ordained Romani women in the church, I am very grateful for the legacy of Jane Haining, and we just placed a stumbling stone in front of the church recently to remind everyone of her legacy. But her legacy, including with the legacy of St. Columba's in Budapest, gives me a hope of a church that is inclusive and welcomes all. And serving at St. Columba's kept me going in ministry during difficult times. We are also grateful for the various support and very generous support of the Church of Scotland in response to the war in Ukraine, including the visit to Transcarpathia, Ukraine of the Right Reverend Susan Brown and Ian Alexander. Thank you for visiting our churches there. Since the outbreak of the war in 2022 February, Hungary has seen an influx of refugees from Ukraine reaching 4,286,000 border crossings from Ukraine as of February 12, 2024. It is important to understand the history of Central Europe. Because of that, there is a significant Hungarian Reformed community, a Reformed minority in Ukraine today, as well as in other countries. So because of that, the Hungarian Reformed Church in Ukraine have always emphasized practical support to the people in need, and those efforts being really increased since the displaced people arrived from the war zones. Their number and their needs are very high until today, and they are present both in the cities and the villages. The Hungarian Reformed Church Aid had helped in a variety of ways, thanks to your support as well. And in Transcarpathia, Ukraine, till today, we function 22 social or soup kitchens that we can only function until October. Following the outbreak of the war, we developed a Ukraine response program to those who are arriving to Hungary. And as expected in disaster response scenarios, donation fatigue set in, leading to a reduction in financial support and staff. As you've been following the news and been supporting our ministry, I just wanted to share a few concerns that we still have today in Ukraine and in Hungary. A major concern for the Hungarian Reformed Church community in Ukraine is military conscription. Hungarian communities are very distant from the combat, are weakened by their men being rounded up and taken to fighting. Some men have already been taken. No men are allowed to leave the country anymore in case they are needed next. Without special paper, they cannot even walk around during the day in the villages and towns close to the border. Young men studying abroad are afraid to go home. And one minister had spoken about wondering if he could just start a Bible study for married couples when the men are afraid to leave their houses. The husbands informed him that they were okay leaving their homes if the group met at night, so that they wouldn't be seen easily. And the longer this way goes on, the more emotionally draining it is for these communities, especially as teenager boys are becoming adults and come to a military age. Inflation is high, there is a high number of widows and elderly, and suicide rates are getting higher and higher. More and more people suffer from cancer and die between the age of 50 to 60. Many people from my Roma community are in Hungary and in Western Ukraine. They have very special needs, and we try to respond to them because many of them couldn't attend public school in Ukraine. So now it's very hard to integrate them into the Hungarian school system as they arrive to Hungary. It is a great opportunity for them to learn, but there is a lot of need for help. On final note, St. Columba's Church of Scotland in Budapest has also adopted the aid it gives. At first, the congregation provided basic needs. Then last summer, we organized a children's camp for Ukrainian students. And one memory I have is a young Ukrainian boy coming to the camp every day from the huge Budapest alone. She's staying alone with the mom because the male members of his family are back in Ukraine fighting. And he came every day alone just to learn about the Bible. And he had the most complex questions I've ever heard before. Now we opened our doors for a Ukrainian Orthodox congregation to worship. And just last week, we arranged a psychological first aid training for Ukrainians to support each other. I shared all this so you know what is happening today and how you supported us. And I believe through all of these, we not only done the work as the Hungarian Reformed Church and St. Columba's, but we've done it all together. So thank you for all of you.
Could I ask for James McVean and then Stephen Sass, please?
McVean 202. Moderator, thank you, Convener, for a comprehensive report on the work of FAPLT. I welcome the comments in the report in relation to children and young people at section 2.4.1. Like many congregations, my own church in Milton of Campsie runs a summer event, a 12-day programme of activities called Go Mad, Go Make a Difference, with additional supporting events during the rest of the calendar year. I'd like, though, to highlight the work of another children and young people's organisation that reaches out into the communities we are part of, a community within our church community, the Boys Brigade. There are many people in the Assembly today with a link to the BB. There are 4 BB captains and at least 6 chaplains within the Glasgow Presbytery Commissioner Group, and I've spotted a couple of lapel badges with BB anchors as I walked around this week. More importantly for me was a conversation with one of our current probationer ministers who I knew as a young person within the BB community in Glasgow. Moderator, the BB in Scotland is a community that connects with over 12,000 families in Church of Scotland congregations. Our faith journey model is to engage, explore, encounter and expand. Properly resourced and managed, it's a community that can be an effective way for churches to engage with children, young people and families. Properly resourced and managed, it's a community where the programme includes resources to help young people explore the Bible in an environment that models Christian values. Properly resourced and managed, it's a community that offers opportunities for young people to encounter Jesus and make a personal decision to become a Christian. And it's a community that can, within the wider church community and partner organisations, perhaps by working with the New Guild Lift initiative, allow young people to grow their faith and expand the kingdom through outreach to friends and family. Moderator, we spoke yesterday about new worshipping communities. For many young people, BB is church. It is a worshipping community. My Sunday worship last weekend was at Canongate Kirk, where BB members attended after the Guard of Honour event at St Giles. This Sunday, I'll be in overseas duty on Cumbria as catering manager for our BB National Camp, where over 100 young people and leaders will, having had a healthy breakfast, join the local congregation in an open marquee for morning worship. It's an opportunity to engage with the community. My day job is development and outreach team leader for the Boys Brigade in Glasgow. We're currently working with BB UK on a project called Building Stronger, where one of the objectives, where needed, is to strengthen our relationship with our congregations. As a community within our wider church community, I believe we have an opportunity to reset, where needed, the relationship with congregations, look at ways to remodel, and importantly, revitalise our link to the wider church. I hope and pray that the Boys Brigade Building Stronger project can work in partnership with the wider Building Together theme of the Assembly and allow our broader community to live life to the full. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Sass and then Alistair Bruce.
(422) Stephen Sass. Moderator, over many years and many General Assemblies, there has been various deliverances and comments made on the subject of the Church of Scotland's response to the Chinook tragedy on the Mull of Kintyre in 1994. Every 5 years, there has been a remembrance service in the South End Parish Church and also at the cairn on the Mull of Kintyre. This year, there will once again be a service of remembrance in the South End Parish Church and on the Mull of Kintyre on the 2nd of June. There's been a number of articles and reports in the media about the lack of support from the Ministry of Defence to the members of the families of those who perished in the horrific crash so many years ago. However, the Ministry of Defence has been very supportive to myself through the chaplaincy of the MOD. A special word of thanks to the Reverend Colin Bell, Senior Chaplain, 38 Irish Brigade, who helped me as the Parish Minister of the South Kintyre parishes to plan these mentioned special services of remembrance on the 30th anniversary of the Chinook crash that took the lives of 29 people who served. The Church of Scotland is indeed being a source of support to many of the members of the families who are still mourning the loss of their loved ones. I ask the General Assembly to take note of this and to keep those who, after all these years, are still mourning the loss of their loved ones in prayer.
Thank you. Now I'm proposing, I have got 6 names on the screen at the minute that will take these 6 and then just ask the convener to do a kind of general summary. because I think by then we'll be ready for lunch. So, Alistair Bruce.
Moderator Alistair Bruce, number 353. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Faith Action Programme leadership team for their wide-ranging report, the extensive ground it covers, and the engagement it shows with the heart of Jesus' church. And secondly, for context, my comment is in reference to section 2 of the report as it deals with the church's connections and relationship with schools and education. I'd like to commend the work of school chaplains in various guises across the church and the way they support and encourage their schools, teachers, and young people. Moreover, I heartily agree with the statement made in the report that through our extensive provision of youth and children's workers, the care and dedication of school chaplains, we are clear that we always put the welfare of children and young people first. Yet somehow my heart is restless. Moderator and friends, I'm restless because of the conversations I've had with friends and elders in my parish about their experiences in recent time in educational settings. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to a friend, an elder from my church, about work and life while our kids played together. My friend and elder is a language teacher of a decade, and in the course of conversation, she said that these days she is finding it difficult to discipline certain students in her classes because when she does, she's told that she can't speak to them this way because she is a woman. So she is often forced to send for a male member of the senior leadership team to come and deal with the situation. And this makes my heart restless. In the school my children attend, there are so many wonderful teachers whose positive impact on our own children and their struggles we are so thankful for. However, in their normal daily routine of setting clear and consistent boundaries and expectations for pupils, an early years teacher was knocked unconscious by one of her P1 class while she was talking to them. This makes my heart restless. And then I turned on Radio Scotland when I was on my way to do my weekly shopping, and they were interviewing a teacher who had left the profession because of the conditions, and this made my heart more restless. And I wondered what was causing this restlessness. And so I wondered from my original conversation if it was the recent and sudden increase in misogyny in Western social culture and whether social influencers such as Andrew Tate were the catalyst. And then my friend emailed and said, I've pondered many times about how in no other industry do you go to work knowing that your day will be full of rudeness, disrespect, and behavior management admin. And I realize that the issue is more than just gender issues. And it makes my heart more restless. And then another teacher friend texted me out of the blue and asked if I'd seen a general rise in misogyny in young people. Their reason for asking was that they found Google slides in the school system that their P6 boys had made violently objectifying girls in their school, and a neighbouring school found a spreadsheet where a group of boys had ranked the girls in the school in the most violent and sexual terms. These are issues education is having to deal with and address, and my heart is restless and broken. And that's even before we consider the Academy Deputy Head Teacher who explained that we were sitting on a teenage mental health time bomb because of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are woefully under-equipped to address it, or the mental health issues of young people whose school transitions were non-existent because of the pandemic. Moderator, of course, these could be written off as isolated examples, but then when a number of isolated examples crop up together, it becomes a trend. And when a trend spreads further than my middle-class part of rural Aberdeenshire into Perth and Edinburgh and Glasgow, it becomes a culture. Jesus spoke of nothing more than his kingdom, sometimes described as God's culture. And so I think as disciples of Jesus, we have something new but old to speak into this culture through the privilege of incarnational presence of all ministries of the church. And I hope and I pray that I'm wrong in my restlessness, but we must be prepared to equip ourselves with research and response to know how to speak into these new and rapidly increasing situations, to be a light for challenge and transformation, because although these trends sit in education, That means they are also in our youth groups, our BB companies, our GB companies, our Sunday schools, and our homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Alistair Burrow, then Neil Glover, followed by Fiona McDougall.
Moderator, Alistair Burrow, 151. I was a Boys Brigade leader for 52 years. I know I don't look it, but I'm not including my time as a boy in the Boys Brigade. When I came to the end of that in 1969, I was called to serve a brand new company. And I've been in various companies in various churches since. I was going to say much of what Jim McVean said, but as time is pressing, I just want to make a couple of points. First of all, to welcome the references to young people in the report. It's a very short part of it. I think I would like to see it being rather more, but I appreciate all the work that the committee has been given to do. I'd just like to mention that the Guild Deliverances 2, 3 and 4, which you've just agreed earlier this morning, would apply equally to the Boys Brigade companies in your area or your church. And just to emphasise that the Boys Brigade has been what I'll call an alternative worshipping community for the last 140 years. We've been doing it ourselves. When I joined the first company I was recruited to way back in 1969, I was invited, it was a Baptist church, I was invited to preach the sermon at a service which the Boys Brigade took. I haven't preached another sermon since 1969 until last year when I couldn't find enough volunteers from my Kirk session to take the service that we had agreed to take to give the minister a morning off. And so I ended up doing it in the Church of Scotland for the first time just last year. And I think that's indicative of the sort of engagement which we have with our young people and our congregations in general, but I'll not emphasise that. I would just say that the parents of the boys that we have, or the boys and girls that we have in our Boys Brigade companies today, are the church's missing generation. And I would wonder if you are, I'm not going to ask the committee to do this, I think I would ask commissioners to think about whether you could use the basis of the alternative worshipping communities you have with your Boys Brigade and Girls Brigade companies to build something with the parents that we are missing in all of our churches as something going forward for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Glover.
Neil Glover, 303, convener of Seeds for Growth. First of all, in reference to section 6.1 of the report, which I think is excellent, about new worshipping communities, I want to first of all thank FAPLT for the very collaborative way that they have worked with Seeds for Growth in developing our work around new worshipping communities. New worshipping communities have a remarkable capacity to reach people who do not currently go to church. For example, in a cluster of new worshipping communities in the Southwest Presbytery, it's estimated about half the members of those communities would be people who would not otherwise go to church. In the report, there is reference to the Forge Cairn training processes. I want to pay tribute to these because Forge and Cairn have done a remarkable amount to encourage work in new worshipping communities across the whole of the Church of Scotland. They work beyond the Church of Scotland, but they've had a great impact in it. I think, in fact, there's a lunchtime fringe event in which we can find out more. Also in that report, it mentions the courses at Trinity College in Glasgow and New College here in Edinburgh. And I think the New College course, and the Trinity maybe as well, is a distance course. I'd really like to encourage commissioners to think about going on these courses. They're terrific. They have a great energising effect on congregations. I would also just say in reassurance to Brian Kerr, who asked a question, and commissioners may have had that question as well. I know that there is in FAPL a desire to support a range of training providers, and that also exists in Seeds for Growth. And sometimes if people name one training provider, we ask them to make sure that other training providers are also made available to people. So thank you, FAPL, for all you've got there about new worshipping communities, and thank you for the way that you've worked with Seeds for Growth.
Thank you. Fiona McDougall, Dave Slater, David Sim and Lunch.
Fiona McDougall, 213. Moderator, firstly, let me thank all of our committees, all our presbyteries and all our hard-working staff. The presbytery plan has been extremely hard on all presbyteries, and no church can escape the hurt, the fear, but also the hope and the joy within our plans. We hear a lot about ministers, and rightly so. However, personally, I think that we have treated our MDS staff, including our deacons, extremely harshly. I understand the financial implications in employment with third sector charities. I understand the legal help that has been given, the help with finding other positions. I understand that job losses are inevitable. However, what I cannot understand is the severe lack of love and care of our staff when we are supposed to be a loving church. We have pastoral care in place. We've heard that people are listening. But are we really listening? I've talked with many MDS staff, and there is a distinct lack of love. I have listened to that pain. I have learned and listened when MDS staff tell of working and ministering in our church for over 30 years to be told this is the end of the line because their skill set and their position no longer fits. And then they lose the right to worship. I can hear and feel the pain that this causes. Our staff in our churches encounter abuse, foul language, and work tirelessly to put the values that Jesus taught into action. And yet, as a church, I'm finding that lacking. Is it beyond reason to offer the staff that wish to continue to lead worship a free place on a worship leading course? £250 is a lot of money when you don't have any. Is it beyond reason to allow the staff that wish to talk about what's going on in their positions to talk with elders? I know that this is a legal issue, but if that staff member is not within a church, then we are the point of call for that. I spoke with an MDS who is at the moment trying to find funding for her own position. Now, this is a session issue, but it's hard for sessions to know where to start to look. And then when we start job descriptions, we're told, well, you can't have that. We ask our staff, we cannot ask our staff. And then we're told we can't ask them to work on a Sunday. I feel that resources are needed for funding and for writing job descriptions. And if that is already out there, then all sessions should be informed of this. And these should be easy to find. We read and hear about walking humbly with God. That goes for all of us. Not just those of us on the ground, but those in power. We need to make it easier for us, all of us, to understand this process. We need to give our staff and sessions more information on the implications of job cuts, hours cuts, the implications of charges going into linkages or unions. We need to do this, not only through the legal processes, but also pastorally. Moderator, I implore those in HR in positions of senior positions of our committees to look at these rules and to see if there is any way in which our staff are treated in a more loving way, and to allow them to continue sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Slater.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, and I see you as well. Yes, please speak.
Moderator Slater, a hoon, a hoch, a shach. Moderator Slater 187. I'm encouraged by the convener's emphasis on preparing for growth. And though I have to declare I'm not a statistician, hot off the press today are census figures which I believe suggest a huge growth in those declaring that they have skills in the Gaelic language, perhaps a 50% growth in numbers overall since 2011, and in some combinations of skills, 100% or greater growth. I haven't yet looked at the geographical breakdown, but as newly appointed interim moderator of St Columba Gaelic Church of Scotland in Glasgow, linked with Blowart Hill, and as a Gaelic learner, I'm encouraged by this growth of our potential mission field, as well as the developments that we've had in recent years in Gaelic resources, such as the Lego Easter story. I trust that the leadership team, amongst their many responsibilities and priorities, continue to encourage the Gaelic group through the Mission Support Programme group. Tang vor a moderator. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. And David Sim.
Moderator Sim 423, keeping everyone from lunch. I'd like to thank the convener for his inspiring presentation this morning. I'm heartened to hear the approach being taken to this massive workload and this seemingly impossible challenge. We are a resurrection faith and a resurrection church. We believe that God is active in the world and the Holy Spirit can guide and speak and challenge and move. And there's a risk that we simply ask God to rubber stamp what we've already decided or what we wish could happen. So the pause to reflect and lament and listen that Tommy told us about is so welcome. I heard of a congregation outside Scotland which took that time. In their case, they decided their season was over and they closed their doors. You'll be pleased to know the story doesn't finish there. The money was distributed to 2 neighbouring congregations. Thanks to that funding, one congregation became a powerhouse of feeding the hungry. Another congregation grew several-fold and changed hundreds of lives through introducing them to Christ. Resurrection. Sometimes the answers are not possible for us to easily see because God is more wonderful than we can possibly believe. So I'd just like to say thank you to the FAPLT team and our wonderful staff who have an almost impossible job. I ask that you give them grace and time. I give thanks that everything is possible with God when we discern and answer his calling on our lives and give ourselves over to his path for us. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Tommy, I'm going to suggest if you've any summing up, we could do it just after lunch, if you don't mind. So we'll suspend whatever that word is until 2 p.m. And remember, if there's someone sitting on their own, please invite them for lunch with you. Thank you.